So our main character, Satoru Fujinuma, was a 29-year-old man living in Japan. He lived a normal life until he was framed for his mother's death, having to run from the police. Suddenly, a revival occurs, which is the phenomenon in which we go back in time, sending him all the way back to 1988 when he was just 10 years old. Satoru soon learned that his goal was to save the life of Hinazuki Kaio, who in his original timeline was murdered, initiating a chain of serial kidnappings and murders by, presumably, the same man who murdered his mother. Satoru tried his best to become friends with Kaio, believing that she was singled out due to her lonely nature, because she had no friends, and because she had a bad family life. They were able to become close friends along with Satoru's friends at the time, even finding out that they share the same birthday, celebrating them together. But when Satoru came to school the very next day, Kaio didn't show up to school and was nowhere to be found. Satoru can't believe it. Just yesterday, she had promised to give him his birthday gift, which she had been working so hard to make for him. Of course, nobody knows what happened to Kaio except for Satoru, because he knows what happened to her in his original timeline. Everybody thinks she's just homesick from school today, but like I said, Satoru's speechless. Before school even ends, Satoru runs out, darting straight towards Kaio's place. He's banging on the door, but no response. He looks through the window and there's no lights inside. As he walks out back, he notices the shed is cracked open. Previously, he had found her there, lying in the cold after she was attacked by her own mother, and is honestly afraid to open it. But when he finally does, it's empty. What he does find are some rubber footprints leading away from the shed. Footprints that he could tell were adult male sized. He knows that it snowed just 2 days ago, so somebody had to have been here since then. From inside the house, creeping through the window, the boyfriend of Kaio's mother is staring through at Satoru, asking her what he should do. He's met with nothing but silence. Satoru walks by the tree that Kaio used to stand by all the time, tears rolling down his face. Because of the incident, Satoru ended up taking the next 2 days off of school. He wakes up in the morning to see his mom talking to one of her coworkers outside. She works for a local news station, and this guy is a reporter. Later that night, at dinner, she's reassuring Satoru that this wasn't his fault. He's saying that he didn't want her to be alone, and she tells him that he accomplished that. They had spent a bunch of time together, but Satoru says it clearly wasn't enough. He had wanted to protect her, but he had already failed at that. Sachiko, his mother, tells him that there's only so much one singular person can do, whether it be her or him. There's no point in beating yourself up over something that's already happened. You gotta look forward. She advised him to go back to school since he'll only get more and more depressed staying at home all alone. And fast forward to the next day, he's there at school when the teacher gives an announcement to the class. He says that he's sad to say that Satoru's not actually homesick from school, but instead she's moved away to live with her grandmother, but he says that she's doing well in a nearby city. Later on, the teacher's having a one-on-one with Satoru. He knows that Satoru knows the truth, so he explains to him that story about living with their grandmother was just something that the school and the parent-teacher association had came up with, so he's asking him to just go along with it for now, and Satoru agrees. We get some context that there was a media blackout so that the news wasn't broadcasted at times the kids would be home, and near Kaio's place, a police car had been parked there at all times. Kaio's mother is a big suspect for the case. We also get to see that 6 days after Kaio's disappearance, another girl from a different school had disappeared. We see Satoru and Kenya walking home, and he says that his friend, who went to the school of the other missing girl, told him that she had moved away from home and is living with her grandmother, just the same story that they told Kaio. He asked Satoru if the whole grandmother story was all a lie, but Satoru just doesn't respond. He realizes that while there are a few small differences, his original timeline was starting to repeat itself. Finally, the investigation was made public and was ran on local news stations. The police car that was parked outside of Kaio's house only showed up every now and then, and he assumes that they must have shifted the investigation past this incident and towards a serial kidnapping incident instead. But he notices that just 10 days after Kaio had disappeared, he had seen her mother throwing away a trash bag with a pair of half-knitted gloves inside. He gets flashback to Kaio's promise to make him a gift, and as soon as he puts two and two together, he begins running, screaming, and crying all at the same time. Suddenly, he's back in 2006. He has successfully evaded the cops for now, but they're everywhere. He's the prime suspect in the murder of his 52-year-old mother, with the eyewitness testimony at that. Everything's coming back to him. On top of the baggage that he couldn't save Kaio, and he's realizing that he's probably in the worst position he could be in right now. But that's his reality. He has to prepare to escape. Ultimately, all he could think of was to hide under a bridge the typical runaway spot. He says it's not the worst spot though, since his story's probably not on the news yet. He knows he's gotta calm down and think about what he's gonna do next. He's trying to think of the reason she was murdered. Was it because she had found who the actual culprit was? He's trying to remember if maybe her phone or her bag was left in the apartment, but he doesn't recall seeing them. He's thinking maybe the killer had took them. The more he thinks about it, the more questions he has. He ends up at this little food spot with a coffee, just wish that he could go somewhere and get a proper night's worth of sleep. When all of a sudden, he gets a call. He ends up at his manager's place saying that he's sorry for missing out on work. His manager's not really sure what's going on. He was just checking in on him as they both share a meal. Satoru had ended up telling him that he had just gotten into a big argument with his mom, so he got put out of the house. And the manager's gonna let him sleep there for the night, but he says that he's gotta make sure to get things right with his mom eventually. Satoru thanks him when he asks him if he wants a beer, but as he checks, he's clean out of them. He says he's gonna run up to the store right quick, and Satoru just looks at him, giving him a light smile. Thinking of his supervisor, he's always been the big brother type, and he feels sorry for lying to him. As Satoru turns on the TV to have on in the background, it defaults to the news channel that it was last on. On the news, they're talking about a woman's body found in the apartment of her son. They're talking, of course, about Satoru's case. He starts to panic, never expecting it to have been on the news so fast, and as he looks out the window, the manager's out there talking with the police. He starts running down the stairs, getting mad at himself for being so naive. He almost starts getting mad at the manager, but realizes that it's not his fault. He's just always trying to do the right thing. As he sneaks out the back, he ends up hopping over this wall, but falling on his way down. As his phone drops out of his pocket, somebody picks it up, shining a light on him. But the whole time, it's Airi. She's pretty happy to be seeing him, but Satoru's confused. She tells him he shouldn't leave his phone on since the police are gonna track him through GPS. She tells him to get up off the ground. She's gonna help him escape. As they escape back to her place, he's apologizing for getting her involved in this, but she says it's all good and not to worry about it. He starts double checking with her if she knew what the situation was and if she really wanted him in her parents' house like this, but she says she's fully aware. The police had came by to the shop earlier and it was on the news. So he asks her, why would she want to house him like this then? And she says it's obvious, because there's no way he did it. She had got to meet his mother and she knew that she could never raise a killer. He thanks her and she points out that trouble just seems to follow him around, doesn't it? He's not sure exactly what she's talking about or what she's referencing to, but she pulls out a book, one that he left at work the other day. It was the book that included the record of the case of Kaio's murder. She says she can't believe that somebody from his childhood town had passed away on the day of the Doll Festival on March 3rd. Satoru just looks at her, realizing that the day of Kaio's death is different than before. Originally, she had died on March 1st, not even making it to 11 years old, but now it was different. Though it was small, Satoru's revival was able to make a change in his main timeline. As she leaves to return the bike to work, he takes a closer look at the book with Kaio's case in it. As he confirms the date, he realizes that history can actually be changed. If he could somehow get back there one more time, he might actually be able to save her. The next thing we see is Satoru waking up in the morning. He sees on the table a note from Airi saying that she's gonna go about business as usual today. She says her parents should be at the house at 10 a.m. and back by 8 p.m. She gives him her phone number and tells him where the keys to the bike are. He's stepping outside to do whatever he's gotta do, but as he steps out, he notices that the family name outside of the house isn't Katagiri, which is Airi's last name, but a different one instead. Over at the pizza place where Airi and Satoru work at, the manager is talking to this politician, Mr. Nishizono. He's thanking him for some traffic light that he got placed near the business, which apparently increased foot traffic and overall increased sales. Nishizono's being humble, saying it's not much of a big deal, just more of a testament to the good business that they do. All he did was lend him a small helping hand. Out the side, Airi pops up for a second, saying that she's clocked out and is gonna make her way home. The manager says bye, pointing out that she's got a pizza with her today. And she says, yeah, it's for a friend. This dude on some weird shit starts freaking out like, a friend? Is it a girl? On some weird shit. She just ignores this, as she should, and walks home. He's sitting there blushing, and dude who he's having a meeting with goes ahead and makes his leave. As he walks out, he sees Airi walking home. Suddenly, the manager pulls up with a 2 liter of some soda, saying that she forgot it. Is this part of the current promotion going on? She gets it for free. But more importantly, he wanted to talk a bit about Satoru. He says that he can't imagine that he would ever do something as bad as they're saying he did. He tells her that if she happens to run into him, to give him some help since he's really going through it right now. She agrees, saying that she'll help him in any way that she can. He also says that he'll offer his support as well, so get in touch with him if she does run into him, as she thanks him, and they part ways. Over at the library, Satoru's doing his best to find information on the killer. He finds a case of a kidnapping/murder in the city from a few years back, but the person that was caught and arrested for it constantly pled innocent. to this day, extremely similar to the situation with Yuki. As he makes his way back to Airi's parents' crib, he's being real cautious, peeking around corners and shit, but as he makes his way inside, we see that the manager was watching him. He pulls out his phone and starts dialing 911, but it gets snatched by Airi herself. She's like, why are you calling the police? I thought you said to help him out if I ran into him. You said that you would offer your support too. And he's like, nah, you don't understand. I was just worried about you. But she snaps his phone in half, punching him dead in the nose. She's crying, asking him, why you ain't say that from the start? I wanted to trust you. He just looks up at her, speechless. She's like, please, I beg you, if you really are worried about me, then don't call the police to the house of the family that's taking care of me. He just looks off as she walks back inside. Satoru and Airi end up back at the bridge. Since Satoru obviously can't stay there anymore, somebody's found out, and she's just apologizing to him. He said not to worry. He was actually able to get a good night's rest because of her, and to be honest, it's for the best. He also points out that he realized that this wasn't her family's house. It had a different last name. Then she explains that it was her uncle's house. Her parents live out the country, and in order to go to high school, they let her go ahead and stay here. Satoru follows up with another question. How can you trust me? She says that it's not that she can really trust him, but it's that she wants to. She starts telling him a story about when she was back in grade school, about a time when she went shopping with her dad. The owner had stopped him because he was trying to leave with a piece of chocolate in his pocket. Since they lived in a small town, everybody knew each other, so the owner of the store was a close family friend. He promised to forget about the whole chocolate incident if he admitted to stealing and apologized, but her father refused over and over. She said it was the first time that she had heard her calm and gentle father scream like that. Not having a choice, the owner went ahead and called the police, and because of the incident, her dad lost his job. We could see Airi pleading to her father that she knows he didn't do it. She knows that he's innocent. But regardless, after getting fired, he got a divorce and left home. Apparently, her mom had thought that he actually did it too. She explains that she just wants to trust Satoru. It's similar in the way that someone will want to be trusted, but the other way around. She wants to be able to have faith in him and trust that he's telling the truth. Satoru wants her to go back home, and if the police confront her, tell her that he had threatened her into staying with them. But she's obviously not going to do that. She's like, are you dumb? She's not going to throw him under the bus like that. Instead, she actually decides to go back home real quick and get him a change of clothes. While she's there packing a little bag, she gets a text on her cell phone. When she opens it, it's from Sachiko Fujinuma, Satoru's mother. She don't know what's going on. The text says, quote unquote, it's Satoru. Stay right where you are. She's like, did Satoru find his mom's phone? How did that even happen? How would he get it? But after thinking for a second, she realizes that it's from the killer. Quote unquote, stay right where you are. What does that even mean? All of a sudden, smoke starts popping up in the room. We see it's beginning to fill up from under the door. Her house is on fire. As she checks the door, she sees the hallway is filled with smoke, but even the window is bursting out from flames. From inhaling too much, she's passed out. We get a flashback to the scene just before of Airi finishing her story. She said that she guessed her dad couldn't handle the thought of being labeled as a thief, and it made her want to stop believing in people. But years later, her mom had confessed that she regretted not believing in him back then. And that's when she realized that she could continue to love the both of them. She realized that her belief in people was one of the good traits about her. Satoru ended up going back to her house after noticing a fire nearby, and we can see that the neighbors are concerned if anybody could still be inside. He grabs one of their handkerchiefs and runs right in, making his way up the stairs. He's screaming for her, seeing if she could respond, seeing if she's there. And as he's running through all the flames of the smoke, he sees her passed out on the ground. He picks her up, covering her mouth with the handkerchief so that she doesn't inhale any more smoke. And as she regains a bit of consciousness, she slides her phone into Satoru's pocket. He's dragging her along this whole time because she's a lot heavier than he had thought. He ain't exactly the most buff, but also rushing in to save her, the manager runs up. He goes on the other side to help pick her up, and as they take her downstairs, he tells Satoru to dip out back. He's not gonna tell the police as long as he doesn't get Airi mixed up in this anymore. Satoru agrees, not having much of a choice. He ends up in this random parking lot, shocked at the fact of what really just happened. He's wondering if it was the same killer who was behind all of this, thinking that there's no way. He says that he felt her put something in his pocket, and when he pulls it out, he reads the text from his own mother. He realizes that it really was the killer. It had to be. This man really set Airi's house on fire. This the psychopath. Satoru realizes that Airi snuck her phone into his pocket so that the police wouldn't see the text. He's already the prime suspect for killing his mom, so they would think that he has her phone, so having a text from her phone saying that it was him would probably be conclusive enough for them to guarantee that it was him. He says that somehow the killer knew Airi's address, probably following her home from somewhere. Satoru realizes that this killer might be a lot closer than he ever would have thought. Now that shit's really getting serious, he realizes that he can't run anymore. He doesn't have anybody else to go to, and eventually he's just gonna run himself into a corner. So instead, he has to find said killer. Either he finds him or gets caught trying. We get a scene of the very next day, and somebody's getting a call. Who is this? I don't have this number saved. Who's calling me? Who was on the other line was Satoru. This mysterious man just smiles. Like, if it really is you, then it's about time. I've been waiting for you to call. But let's not talk through the phone. Let's meet somewhere. I know you don't know me, but we'll save the introductions for then. Because after all, you can still be the one who murdered your mother. Satoru ends up at this tea shop, and as he walks in, this man calls for him. As he sits down, he introduces himself as Sawada, former worker at TV Ishikari, which is the same TV station that Satoru's mom worked for. He extends his hand saying, "Thank God, it really is you. I could just tell. You're a spitting image of your mother." Sawada starts it right off the bat by saying two things. One, I didn't tip off the police, and two, I didn't murder your mother neither. Satoru's like, what, you don't expect me to be the murderer? And he's like, of course not. A mother like her could have never raised a murderer. As they go back to his office, Satoru hands him a slip of paper which he had originally grabbed from the apartment, which his mom had ended up setting down way back when. He had it in his pocket the entire time, so that's how he was able to get back in touch with Sawada. He's like, this is quite the situation. And Satoru begins to apologize, saying that it's his fault because he keeps on messing up. But Sawada says it's pointless to blame yourself for something after it already happened. And Satoru looks up at him as he says, "It was your mother's famous words. He loved to say it." Now, it's time to get down to business. He wants to talk about what he discussed with her over the phone. Now remember, the day that she got killed, she had talked with somebody over the phone saying that she finally remembered about the case, saying that it probably wasn't Yuki. She had finally realized who it could be. Now flashback to that phone call, Sachiko's asking him if he remembered the serial murder case from 18 years ago. And he was like, of course I do. Yuki's still on death row, but hasn't admitted any guilt. That's when she says Satoru's right. It wasn't Yuki, he didn't do it. And she realized who the actual culprit was. She says, tomorrow, let's meet at Koiwa Station. But that was the last he had ever heard from her. He realized that he should have got a name. He should have just asked right then and there. But of course, he never could have expected this. All of a sudden, he wants to talk about another previous incident, the murder of Kayo Inazuki. On the night of March 2nd, 1988, Kayo was locked in the shed after being beaten up by her mother and her mother's boyfriend. She ended up freezing to death. At first, the police suspected the mother and the boyfriend, obviously, thinking that they had hid the body. But in reality, they found out that Kayo had disappeared from the shed from sometime around 10 and 11 p.m. that same night. A couple hours later, when her mother had noticed that she was gone, she had nonchalantly called Satoru's house and asked if they knew where Kayo was. The evidence brought back that it was Yuki who had kidnapped her, with one of the pieces of evidence being that there were rubber prints made near the shed which matched with boots found at his house. The official version of the events follows as such. He had knocked her out using straight force, took pictures of her, and took her to a commercial freezer where he used a spray to speed up her death. After her body temperature had dropped low enough, she was brain dead. He waited 30 minutes just to secure that she was dead, and he had returned the corpse back to the shed before sunrise. Satoru clenched his fist, screaming that Yuki would never do something like that, and Sawada says that a little after Kayo, Hiromi and a girl named Naya, which was the girl from the other school that Kenya had mentioned, had disappeared too. In each case, the culprit was caught almost immediately, and just like Yuki had said, the culprits denied every bit of wrongdoing. He says, now, if we take your current predicament into account, do you see any type of pattern? Satoru thinks about it for a second, then notices. Sawada says that people call him crazy for investigating all types of closed cases, but in reality, none of these cases are actually closed. Kayo, Hiromi, Aya, and Sachiko were all killed by the same man who frames other people for his crimes. And Satoru realizes that he's in the city right now. Sawada says he's pretty tricky though. He thinks his plans out very thoroughly. By creating additional suspects, he's able to delay each investigation, which causes evidence and testimonies to diminish as the crime scenes begins to deteriorate. And thanks to that, every trail that leads up to him goes cold. We then get a view of the hospital where Airi wakes up. She's feeling fine as she takes her mask off and walks out, but she hides behind a corner because she hears 2 men in suits talking about Sadaru. They were sent over to Airi in order to protect her from Sadaru, and she's extremely upset that everybody's suspecting him right now when he's the one that's hurting the most. Rewind to her in the hospital earlier, her uncle and aunt are all putting the blame on Sadaru, saying that he was just a stalker and it's not her fault. They're like, oh, I feel bad for you, you must have been so scared. Airi's trying her best to say that that's not what happened, that's not how it went down. He's not a stalker, but Auntie's just saying, it's okay, I'm sorry we didn't notice anything. If anything, it's our fault. We should have took better care of you. Aunt tell her that the police are searching for him right now, so you don't gotta be scared, everything's gonna be okay. And Airi's thinking, you're wrong. You've got it all wrong. As she's at the hospital in the little shop area, she's reading the newspaper, and she can even see that these people were following her at all times. She can't believe that Sadaru, her co-worker, the same person who she had shared dinner with alongside his mother, is going to be arrested for murder and arson when she knows that he didn't do it. Thinking back to it, it's the same situation as with her father. She knows he's innocent, but nobody believes her. Nobody believes him. She's trying to think, who would believe her? Who could she talk to when nobody else would? When we see somebody standing over her. Back with Sadaru, Sawada's asking him about the text that Airi had gotten from the killer. He hands her the phone, explaining that Airi's still in the hospital right now after inhaling all the fumes and whatever. And as he reads the text, he realized that he's trying to speed up this murder investigation by framing Sadaru for arson as well. Sadaru says that after his mom had realized the kidnapping attempt, she was killed that same night. But in order to know when Sadaru would get home in order to frame her for the killing, he must have known his work schedule. He must have been able to see it somewhere at the store. And he thinks that Airi must have seen him get behind the counter and see it at the store, so that's why he wanted to get her as well in order to silence a piece of evidence, an eyewitness. Sawada thinks about it, thinking that they might be able to use this to figure out who it is. He gets up saying that he's going to go to the hospital and points out that there are reports on the murders from 18 years ago on his computer, giving Sadaru full access to go ahead and take a look. As Sadaru reads the reports, we get to hear some notes from Sawada himself. He believes that Yuki actually thinks his father may be the murderer, but out of love for his father, he doesn't want to confess or provide any testimony to put any blame on him, which inadvertently is making his case look worse. Several students from the school had pointed out that Kaio was seen with Yuki on a number of occasions. Sadaru's testimony was completely ignored, but the testimonies from other students were taken into quote-unquote serious consideration. As he's clicking around, he finds a list of suspects. He doesn't recognize any of the names besides Yuki's and his father's, and he's surprised to see that there's only 5 of them. For the murder of Hiromi, the police assume that Hiromi was murdered after being mistaken for being a girl, since all of the suspects were little girls. And because of that, the police made a list of 5 suspects who weren't very well acquainted with Hiromi, who could have easily mistaken him for a girl. Thinking back to the 5th grade, Sadaru could see that Hiromi definitely did have feminine characteristics or tendencies, saying that it makes sense why he could have been mistaken for a girl. But he believes that the culprit was fully aware of his gender and killed him on purpose in order to avoid being on that list of suspects. Yuki had been arrested before after being reported for hanging out with a 3rd grade girl who was alone. After pictures of Hiromi's death was found at Yuki's workplace, and through a search of his room, seeing some specific magazines and tapes, the police concluded that he had tendencies. Sadaru gets mad, knowing that Yuki never owned anything like that, but instead were planted by the killer himself. Remember, when Sadaru had noticed these originally in his room, Yuki had said that they were a gift from somebody, so he just couldn't throw it away. And I'm not gonna lie, I did not say that in the last video. I didn't realize that was proof of anything. But this does prove that Yuki had made contact with the killer. It was gifted to him, so take that for what it's worth. But as Sadaru's upset, clicking around the computer, he finds a list of possible suspects. And knowing that the killer has to be on there, he clicks on it. But we go back to Airi's point of view, as a nurse walks in, but she's still sleeping. Sawada's over at the front desk saying that he's here to visit, but first he asks where the restroom is, because he's really got to go. Of course, since he's being protected right now, they're not going to allow Airi to have any visitors, so in order to find her room, he uses this little distraction to take a look at the board. For all of the patients, he says that there are no vacancies except for room 201. Of course, they wouldn't put her name up there because she's under protection right now, so 201 has to be where she's at. The nurse walked out of 201 telling the bodyguards that she was still asleep, and they're like, alright, cool. When all of a sudden, Sawada runs by saying, oh my god, I'm gonna pee my pants, running around the corner. They're laughing at him, but my man smoothly slides right back into the room. As he walks in, he's like, pardon my intrusion, Airi, but we need to talk. But as she gets up, she says, it doesn't seem like you're Satoru. It's good to meet you. I'm Airi's mom. We get a flashback to Airi talking to her mom who came to visit. Remember, not her aunt who she lives with, but her mom from back in the day back at home. She's pleading to her, begging her to understand, begging her to believe her that Satoru didn't do it. She says she knows that he didn't kill his mom. She knows that he didn't light the house on fire. He was actually the one that came in to save her. She's like, I don't know what you've been told, but they even think I might be an accomplice. None of this is true. It hurts so much that nobody believes in me. But on top of that, people are even less likely to believe in Satoru, and she says that hurts her even more. As she's on the verge of tears, her mother just calls her name. She says, even now, I still feel like way back then, I should have stayed with your father. In the time that he was most alone, out of everybody, I should have believed him. So now, she says she's not going to make the same mistake. She's like, don't worry, I believe you. Anything you need me to do, I got you. We see Airi running out of the hospital, but this car following after her. While Satoru is still in Sawada's office, Airi's phone starts ringing and he's upset that he forgot to turn it off. As he answers, he hears her voice saying, thank goodness it was still on. Shocked, realizing that it's her, he's asking if she's okay and she's like, yeah, I'm all good, it's all good. But aside from that, can we meet at the usual place, like right now? Satoru denies, saying that he knows that if anybody sees them near each other, it's just going to cause even more problems for her. She's going to get labeled as his accomplice and it's just going to get way more tricky. Plus, he promised the manager that he wouldn't get her involved anymore, but she cuts him off saying that it's going to be okay. She promises that she'll come along. As he's on his way there, he says that he can't believe he's actually doing this. They could have just talked about whatever over the phone. He knows that things are only going to get worse for her if she stays involved, but for some reason, he still went. Off to the side, he sees these kids playing with this airplane and they're upset that it doesn't fly. He walks up, grabbing it and fixing it up a little bit, explaining that this little bend right here is going to give it some lift. And the kids is like, bro, who is this old ass bro? Is this shit really gonna make it fly? And he's like, it will, I promise. As he hands it back to the kid, he goes ahead and throws it as it starts flying through the air, nothing like ever before. They're shocked that it actually worked and begin chasing after it. But then he hears some adults in the park saying like, what is he doing at this hour? Why is he hanging around them? Is he unemployed? And as he starts to rush away, he begins to realize that this is probably the same type of thing that Yuki had to deal with too. As he ends up under the bridge, which was the meeting spot for Airi, we see him just trying to pass the time. And after long enough, he realizes that she's not going to come and decides to get up and go. But as he walks past, she finally shows up. He's excited to see that she's still in good health and in good spirits after everything she had to go through. She's like, see, I'm all good. I'm healthy. I came alone, just like I promised. Satoru looks down and thinks to himself that he feels bad that he thought this could have been a police trap all along. But as he normally does, he realizes that he accidentally said that out loud with Airi standing right in front of him. She starts laughing, saying that he should be worried about that since, you feel me, he's a fugitive after all. He kind of laughs it off as she looks up, saying, but I'm happy that you believed in me. As they start talking, he asks her about anybody that could have possibly looked at the schedules while she was at work. If there was anybody that could have gone behind the counter and seen that. She points out that this Nishizono guy is kind of suspicious. She's seen him a couple times and the manager seems to really respect him. And based on the pin that he wears, it seems like he's a city councilor. Could have very easily been able to check the schedule and it wouldn't be surprising if he knew where they all lived. She said what's up to him before, but never really had any conversations with them. Satoru's thinking, Nishizono. He didn't see that name on the list of suspects. At first he thinks it could be an alias, but he's like, surely you can't be on the city council with an alias, right? That wouldn't even make sense. Airi points out that he might have tried to kill her because she knows what he looks like. Satoru's thinking, completely stressed out because he seems to have all the clues, but the puzzle just won't fit. He can't put it together. After seeing him stressed out, she says that she understands how he feels, but he can't beat himself up over it. It's not going to help the situation. It's going to make things worse. Out of nowhere, he says, I have unfinished business from a long time ago. And she got no clue what he's talking about. She's like, what? Oh, I'm talking about a story for a comic that I came up with. He explains that it's a story about this Reaper who made a scheduling error and ended up killing a child. He desperately tried to undo his mistake and fix his wrongs, but the more he tried, the more misfortune that he brought to everybody around him. Even though he had good intentions, all he ever did was hurt people. Airi asks if he's trying to draw the comparison between himself and the Reaper. He's like, well, yeah, isn't it obvious? Look at my life right now. But she starts saying, well, she's not hurt. She's in good condition right now. And all of the stuff that people must have been saying about the Reaper, well, they don't have the full picture. She says that he should have a little more faith in himself. Everything that's going on right now is just a work in progress. It's not finished up yet. And while nobody may know how it ends up, that's just how life goes. Suddenly, these two men walk up. The same men that were defending Airi. They both pull out their badges and they're like, are you Satoru Fujinuma? as police cars pull up and surround the other side as well. Airi runs up, telling Satoru to get out of here, but they shove her out of the way. He's worried about Airi if she's okay, but the agent grabs his arm, putting cuffs on him. Satoru Fujinuma, you're under the arrest for the murder of Sachiko Fujinuma and the attempted murder of Airi Katagiri through arson. As they're taking him out to the car, we get to hear reports that they finally caught him, that he's been apprehended. Airi screaming, saying that Satoru didn't do it, there's no way, but an officer is holding her back. Obviously, nobody's listening to her. At the end of the day, Satoru knew that this time was gonna come. He just didn't expect it to be now. Airi screaming, crying, saying that she promised to come alone, but she accidentally led these people here. She's sorry. She didn't mean it. Though Airi's in despair, Satoru's just walking in solitude. He's thinking to himself that he wants to give Airi the same beam of light that she had given him in his darkest times. She's crying on and on as Satoru finally stops. Airi, you've got it all wrong. It's because you believed in me that I could keep on fighting. I'm glad that I believed in you. As he continues on. But as they're walking, time slows down. As he looks off to the side, he recognizes the same man that he walked past that night his mother died. Satoru's stunned, but he just smiles.